Will Baucus of CBS Sports recently wrote, and this was on Sunday, the games that will define the 2025 season for every team in the top 25. He did consider Tennessee in the top 25. He had them at number 20. He had Tennessee's most important game to be at Alabama. Ironically, and I understand this because of how the all seasons went for both schools and how they finished last year, he had Florida, who he's ranked at number 10 spots ahead of Tennessee. He had their most important game to be Tennessee. Will Baucus' reasoning is this. Now, let me get to Tennessee with Alabama first. Here's what he said. The calculus for Tennessee's 2025 season changed a bit after a brutal spring that saw it lose high upside starting quarterback Nico Iamaleava and whiff on some much-needed wide receiver reinforcements in the transfer portal. Yet the Vols still have a shot to make it to the college football playoff for a second consecutive season. In order to get there, they will need to show they can hang in tough road games, including one against an Alabama team that they've beaten twice, both at home in the past 3 years. Now, here's his argument for Tennessee being Florida's biggest game. He says Florida has tougher opponents on another gauntlet of a schedule, but this annual rivalry contest could come with major late season CFP implications for both teams. This is also a game arguably stacked in Florida's favor, given Tennessee's tumultuous offseason and the fact that the Vols' well-documented road struggles under Coach Josh Heupel, not to mention their struggles at Florida. That's going to lead to today's tough question, which is this. And today's tough question is brought to you by Banks & Jones, and we have it up as a poll question too. For the first time in a long time, is Tennessee-Florida a bigger game for Florida than it is for Tennessee? Now, Tennessee has won 2 of the last 3, but from roughly, we're going to say 1995 all the way until 2022. I think Florida was definitely a bigger game for Tennessee than Tennessee was for Florida. Most of those years, Florida was the better team. And even when they weren't the better team during the Spurrier years, they were owning Tennessee. Also, during that time, Florida, even when the programs were at their peak and this rivalry was at its peak, Florida also had to deal with Florida State at their peak. So they had to circle 2 games. And Florida State would be later in the year, so I think they took Florida State more seriously. Just to give you an example, in 95, Florida went undefeated. They beat Florida State at the end of the regular season. That's what propelled them to the national title game before they lost the title game to Nebraska. They also ended up being Tennessee's only loss. A year later, they beat Tennessee at Neyland Stadium, lost to Florida State at the end of the regular season, got a rematch with Florida State to beat them in the national title game 52-20. The point I'm making is this. Florida had to circle both games, and oftentimes they circled Florida State more. Then came the Urban Meyer years, and Florida launched an 11-game winning streak in a period in which they won 16 of 17 from 2005 to 2021 against Tennessee, in which Urban Meyer, Will Muschamp, and Dan Mullen all went undefeated against Tennessee. Jim McElwain lost 1 game, went 2-1. It was an embarrassing look. Tennessee has somewhat flipped the script the last 3 years. They've won 2 of 3. However, both at home. This game's at Florida. Florida, meanwhile, backed into a bowl game finally with a strong finish under Billy Napier last year after missing a bowl 2 years in a row. And in all 3 instances, Tennessee was the better team, even though they lost to Florida in Gainesville 2 years ago. That loss to Florida in Gainesville 2 years ago effectively saved Billy Napier's job in the moment he could have been fired. I bring all this up to say this. There's a really strong argument all of a sudden that the Tennessee-Florida game is now a bigger deal for Florida than it is for Tennessee. Now, there are some reasons I disagree. And I'm going to say, and my answer is no. It's still a bigger deal for Tennessee. For 2 reasons, actually. First off, and this is already up, David Speaks says it right. Florida is our mental block. If you're a Tennessee fan, yes, Florida is your mental block. Florida's a mental block for Tennessee, and it has been. I think there are times where Tennessee should have beaten Florida, but the mental block of them playing Florida is why they lost. It's the same thing with Kentucky playing Tennessee. There have been years in which Kentucky was better than Tennessee. 2018, 2021. But Tennessee won because somehow they are just a mental block for Kentucky, and Kentucky feels like they're not supposed to win that game. Even 2023, I think Tennessee was better than Kentucky, but playing at Kentucky, that's a game Kentucky should have won. So I definitely think Tennessee's a mental block for Kentucky. Florida's a mental block for Tennessee. Just go back. All you have to do is go back to that 2014 to 2017 4-year run. Tennessee in 2014 and 2015 blew a two-possession fourth quarter lead both times to lose by 1 point. And then in 2017, they lost on a Hail Mary. Now, part of that was just Butch Jones being Butch Jones, but there's still this mental block that, oh, we're playing Florida. 2023, I think, happened too. The minute it spiraled a little bit when Tennessee was playing Florida, panic set in because the fact that they're playing Florida and they're struggling, that causes panic. That's why even when they're at home and playing a bad, floundering Florida team, 2022 and 2024, they have to eke out wins both times. It's just crazy. They needed overtime this past year. That's one reason Florida is still a bigger game for Tennessee than it is for Florida. But there's another reason, too, for this year specifically. And I want to bring that up. First off, today's tough question, again, brought to you by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney. Play to win, why settle? Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com.
Why Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott.
The poll question up, vote on it now. Is the Tennessee-Florida game in 2025 is a bigger deal for Tennessee or Florida? 82% of you are saying Tennessee, and you 82% are right. 18% say Florida. Now, here's the other reason Florida's Tennessee's biggest game this year. It's on the road, and Florida's actually a good team. There's a reason, for instance, that Will Balkus put Florida in the top 10. I mean, he had them right at number 10, and the reason he had them at number 10 is because the reason he has them at number 10 is because they have added a bunch of talent. They had a strong finish to last year. They beat Ole Miss. They beat LSU. They almost beat Tennessee. DJ Lagway is looking like a more and more elite quarterback, and all of a sudden, Florida is in the college football playoff race. Look, Florida's Tennessee's biggest game. Florida's going to define if they get into the playoff or not, because let me just tell you guys up front, they're losing to Georgia in September. They're just not going to be ready to win that game. You can write that off. I don't care that it's at home. You can write it off. Here's the other problem. I don't think Alabama is as bad. I think Alabama's going to return to being the Alabama we saw under Nick Saban. I think they have it all together. Kalen DeBoer was trying to fit a square peg in a round hole with Jalen Milroe last year, and the only reason he did it is because the team loved Jalen Milroe. Kalen DeBoer made a calculation of, let me stay above water for a year while Jalen Milroe is the quarterback and try to win with him because I don't want to lose the team as a whole, and then I'll get my guys the next year. Kalen DeBoer and Alabama are going to take off. So when Will Balkus says Alabama is Tennessee's biggest game, I don't think they are, because I think Alabama is another almost chalked up as a loss. I think Georgia and Alabama are chalked up losses, meaning to get to the college football playoff, Tennessee will have to win at Florida to get to 10-2. They're not getting in at 9-3. There will be a team reach the college football playoff at 9-3 at some point, but Tennessee's not going to be that team this year because the schedule doesn't favor them enough. So honestly, I think the biggest reason Tennessee needs to win the Florida game is because they have to win that to get to the college football playoff. It will define them. Now, as far as Florida goes, Florida has to visit Ole Miss. They have Georgia on a neutral site. They have Georgia in November, so that it's a more winnable game for them than Georgia is for Tennessee. They visit LSU and Miami in September. Look, to get to the playoff, Florida could beat Tennessee and still not make the playoff. Okay, Florida could lose to Tennessee. If Florida loses to Tennessee, they're probably not going to the playoff either. However, their path is still, they got to win again, either at LSU, at Miami, at Texas A&M, or against Georgia on a neutral site. They got to win 2 of those games. So because of that, Tennessee can't be their most important game. Tennessee almost has to be chalked up as a win. Florida is nowhere close to Tennessee. Tennessee is nowhere close to Florida's toughest game. So with that in mind, no, I think Florida is Tennessee's most important game. Beating Florida gets Tennessee into the playoff, assuming they don't have another road mess up like they've had in 2022 and 2024 with South Carolina and Arkansas. Highly possible, but their other road games are Mississippi State. I don't see that happening in Starkville. Jeff Levy is building a good program there, but they're going to still be pretty bad this year. And Kentucky on the road. Tennessee doesn't lose to Kentucky. That just doesn't happen. So those are the only two chances of a road slip up. Those are the two. I think those two games are almost impossible to lose. So with that in mind, I would say that, yeah, the Tennessee-Florida game in 2025 is a bigger deal for Tennessee. One, because the Tennessee-Florida game is always a bigger deal for Tennessee since it's a middle block. But two, and honestly, more importantly, I make the argument that the Tennessee-Florida game is needed more for Tennessee just based on how this year goes. So, yeah, taking that into account, yeah, Tennessee-Florida game is a much, much, much bigger deal for Tennessee. It just is. And so that hasn't really changed. So I got to say, even though I understand where Will Balkus is coming from, I actually think that, yeah, I think Tennessee-Florida is a bigger deal for Tennessee. And I have a hard time seeing how it's not. The poll question, you guys seem to agree with me. It's now 81% Tennessee, 19% Florida. You guys are right. It is. I mean, I totally agree. It's 81% Tennessee, 19% Florida. That's just how it is